So at this point, I feel like a good portion of the country is aware of what's going on with Apple. And we all know, Apple, one of the largest, if not the largest company in the world, or at least the most valuable company in the world, and a small little company called Beeper. And Beeper made an app called Beeper Mini, and it allowed Android devices to access iMessage. So instead of us appearing as green bubbles on your iPhone, we appeared as blue bubbles. But with those blue bubbles came other features like read receipts and encryption and delivery confirmation, high res videos and photos. Things were just faster, just an all around better experience. And I believe I said encryption. And what ended up happening is Apple Appled it, and they found a way to break Beeper. And now, today is the 21st of December. And even if you go to Beeper's blog right now, the co-founder of the company has said, we've put out one last patch or one last update. If Apple breaks this one, we're not going to try again. They've tried a few fixes and they seem to all work temporarily. And then Apple did what Apple does. And yeah, now they don't work. So with the latest update, and I just checked my phone. In fact, let me look at it right now just to make sure I get the verbiage correct. But when you open the app, you need an iMessage registration code. Now, what was going on in the background prior to this last update is Beeper was contacting Apple's servers, but was sending falsified information to the server. It had to essentially tell the servers that your Android device was an iPhone. Not doing anything shady from what Beeper says. They've also open sourced a good portion of the code, if not all of it. So it doesn't seem like they were trying to do something that was damaging really to anybody, but more so just trying to say, hey, there is this void. We want to fill it, and we think it will be for the betterment of everybody. Now, instead of doing all of that automatically, yes, you need this registration code. It says an iMessage registration code is needed to configure iMessage. Enter a code from Beeper Cloud running on a Mac or from a jailbroken iPhone. And at that point, you're like, what? It went from download this app, it automatically recognizes your phone number. And at that point, you can send iMessages from your Android device using your phone number. Then it broke. And then it went to, okay, now in order to send iMessages, you have to use an Apple ID, which some people had, some people didn't. You can easily make one. They're free. It's not that big of a deal. But when you have an Apple ID as your sole iMessage source for sending and receiving them, then your contacts, the people you are sending these messages to, would then have to add your Apple ID to your contact and then continue, the conversation thread. But then, of course, when they make phone calls, they just use your phone number. So really not that big of a deal. But part of the whole point of all of this is making it as easy as possible for the iPhone user to not have to make any changes to their usual messaging experience. We Android users are like, hey, we'll do the work on our end. And of course, when I say we will do the work, I mean, the developers have done the work, and then we will use multiple apps, switch apps, do whatever, so that way we can communicate with our iPhone friends and family members as seamlessly as possible. So like I said, originally it was use your phone number, then it went to using your, and I guess I should say, even when it was use your phone number, you could also use your Apple ID instead if you wanted to, but you had the option of both. Then it just went to, okay, now you can only use your Apple ID. And then now it's, okay, still, I believe you can only use your Apple ID. But in addition to that, you need to either have a Mac or have access to a Mac. So maybe a friend or family member has one, or a jailbroken iPhone. And again, at those points, it's like, Most people aren't even going to try it. I might do it just to see exactly what happens, because my guess, and this is a big guess, but my guess is that if I go through this process, but then I keep my main SIM card in my actual iPhone, then I'll add this Android device, as you know, it now becomes another device that has access to my entire Apple ID sphere. When I send messages from my Android device, it should still pop up using my phone number, would be my guess. But it's still a lot of work, and that's really where, at that point, the whole point of the app is nullified. And even in one of Beeper's blog posts, and I mean, we know it because Apple has said it, sometime next year in 2024, my guess will be with the release of iOS 18. That would be my guess. Apple plans on supporting RCS, and RCS, Rich Communication Services, it's just the next evolution of sending text messages. The way iMessage works between iOS devices is the same way right now that RCS works between Android devices. The only difference is Apple has the availability, the opportunity, the choice to adopt RCS into their messaging app. But up to this point, they've said that they haven't. And like I said, sometime next year in 2024, they plan on adopting RCS. And then that should make messaging between Android devices and iOS devices more seamless. But the other day, and I guess before I go into that story, it's hopeful. We'll see what happens. But the biggest issue is there are different forms, different standards within there are different substandards within the RCS standard. And Apple just saying, we'll adopt RCS doesn't really tell the entire story. We won't know everything until they actually adopt it, and then we use it. And then whatever code is made available to whatever developers, they'll definitely do some digging, and we'll see what actually happens. But of course, the big concern is that Apple will do the bare minimum when it comes to adopting this standard, so that way they still continue to get as many users or keep as many users on the iPhone. Now, story time. The other day, I happened to be chatting with a friend, and she has an Android device, and my primary device is an iPhone, but for all of the reasons that I've expressed, I still message her using an Android device because I prefer that better messaging experience. Now, from time to time, we will use WhatsApp, and of course, I could install WhatsApp on the iPhone, and then at that point, we don't really have a problem. But I also talk to my parents using the Android device because both of them have Google Pixels. I bought them for both of them, and I guess I need to give a little bit of backstory. So, with that Android device, I have a data-only plan on the phone. Through T-Mobile, $10 a month. It's 2 gigabytes worth of data, which I know is not a lot, but the reason I have it is because with certain plans, if you choose to stream music, the streaming of the music doesn't count towards your monthly data allotment. So even though I only have 2 gigabytes worth of data, all of the streaming I do using Spotify doesn't count towards that allotment. So for the most part, it's a music streaming phone. And then, now I still chat with some friends and family members through either WhatsApp or through RCS. Now, when I'm connected to Wi-Fi using WhatsApp, not a problem. When I'm not connected to Wi-Fi using WhatsApp, not a problem. But something interesting happened the other day when I was texting my friend who has, I think she has a Samsung Galaxy something. And if we're looking at this left image right here, we see it says free message, unable to send message message blocking is active. Now, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, yes, I do only have a data plan. So that means no phone calls. So if I attempt to make a phone call, it gives me some error. If somebody attempts to call that number, it gives them an error. But then when it comes to text messaging, yes, if I were to send a regular SMS or MMS, it would not go through. Now, what we can see is happening though, is that I did send a text and then I get that message from T-Mobile saying, hey, you can't send text messages. But if we go to the next line, it says RCS chat with Alma. Now, when you use RCS or iMessage or WhatsApp, you're sending these messages through the internet. So it is data that you are sending, even if that data is text, if that makes sense. It is going through the internet. It should not be using your carrier's regular SMS, MMS system, whatever all of that encompasses. But what I found out is that when I was trying to contact my friend, so sending text or sending a link to a website, when in this case it was to the App Store to download Google Messages, I kept getting an error saying, hey, you can't send text messages. So then I started thinking, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? If I'm using an app that supports RCS, it should just be data, regardless of what the contents of the packets are or the frames or whatever. It's still data. But it looks like, and this is, we were actually on the phone while I was doing this, I'm using Google Messages. My friend, she's using Samsung Messages. Even though both messaging apps support RCS, Samsung Messages, from what it appears, at a minimum, does not support the same type of encryption that Google Messages support. And I guess at maximum, maybe, doesn't support any type of encryption at all. Not sure, did some Googling, wasn't able really to find a definitive answer on what type of or if Samsung Messages supports encryption. But I think what was happening here is that because there was no encryption, even though I'm using RCS, T-Mobile's network could see that I'm sending something and it says, no, you are using a messaging app that isn't WhatsApp or whatever, which of course is encrypted, but not saying that it works because it's encrypted. But here, it looks like they see, hey, whether it's text, which again, unfortunately, I cropped the picture so you can't see it above, or a link. I guess maybe I should have tried to send an image, but either way, it's not working either at all or to its full functionality. So then I said, okay, and as you can see, what I did attempt to send her was a link to Google Messages to the App Store. So I believe I ended up sending her a message through WhatsApp to the Play Store. She downloaded it, set it as her default messaging app. And then here on the right, I forget what I was doing when I sent those first two test messages up there at the top. But even though they weren't sent, it doesn't say that I don't get that same error saying message blocking is active. So on that third one where I say test, she did receive it. She sent me back the poop emoji because she said that for some reason, even though I said test on her end, the suggested emoji response was poop. And it worked. And one thing we can see right there next to the time, and even for those ones that weren't sent, that little padlock. So that at least lets us know that these messages are encrypted. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, as I was alluding before, is that if we're talking right here just within Android, so Google Messages, Samsung Messages, and these two apps are implementing different types of RCS. What do you think the iPhone's going to do? Or what do you think Apple's going to do? There's no way that they're going to adopt what Google has put forward, which is probably the best implementation of RCS right now, will be my guess. Is there some small startup app or just some smaller app that does some, I don't know. Signal, sure, they use a Signal protocol, which, so yeah, maybe there is another app that's better. I don't know. But for now, it seems like Google Messages on an Android device is your best bet when it comes to utilizing a client that supports RCS, and that can also serve as your default SMS client. And for anything else, it just won't be as good. And yeah, like I said, my guess is that Apple is going to say, yeah, we support RCS. And they'll probably have like a small little blurb for their little keynote. I don't remember the exact verbiage of the press release that they released it. In fact, they didn't release it. I think they sent it directly to like 9 to 5 Mac or something. And it was something super simple, like, oh yeah, we believe that RCS will offer a better experience, blah, 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 blah. Real brief and to the point, and that was it. But the issue that I would have, and I hope that other people would have too, is that as Apple speaks as if it was their idea to do a lot of stuff. And, there's nothing wrong with implementing something that somebody's already implemented. There's nothing wrong with improving upon it. But yeah, I know that when they do actually start supporting it on the iPhone, they'll act as if, oh yeah, we did this because da 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 da. And right now we're like, well, there's nothing that's preventing you from turning it on right now. And if you are an iPhone customer, I know you have an opinion, and as an Android customer, we have, our opinions. And right now I'm technically both, so I see it from both sides. But for the iPhone users, the biggest complaint that I don't think they voice, which they need to realize, is that Apple is ruining their own experience because Apple won't adopt a standard. They want their customers to blame or convince Android users in this situation. So it's, hey, Android user, you are messing up our group chat. Because most iPhone users aren't thinking, wait a minute, this is just software. Why isn't Apple doing something to make this better? It's no. All of us iPhone users are the same. If there's that one Android user, they're different. So they obviously are the problem. So that is the issue, that iPhone users, in my opinion, aren't aware. Apple is aware, but chooses to do nothing about it. Both entities end up blaming the Android user. So yeah, I just thought this was interesting. Most people aren't trying to send messages when they only have a data only plan, and I just happen to be doing this. And I know that her and I have communicated plenty of times, so I don't know what changed. Yeah, like I just don't know. Like, I was connected to Wi-Fi here. It shouldn't matter where she is. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting that something changed, and now I was no longer able to send her messages through RCS or using an app that supports RCS. And yeah, my fear is Apple is going to do whatever they can in terms of the bare minimum when it comes to supporting RCS. So hopefully we'll see what happens. Beeper Mini is probably dead. And yeah. And of course, the last thing I'll say, and I kind of hinted at it before, is somebody I know would say, well, just use WhatsApp or use Telegram or use Signal or whatever. Again, the whole point of all of this, Beeper Mini, RCS, is we, Android users, don't want to have to inconvenience you iPhone users. That's really what it is. Yes, we both could use Signal. Yes, we both could use Telegram or WhatsApp. But if you, iPhone user, for the majority of your messages, use the Apple Messages app, one, you're either going to just start messaging me out of that app, and then now it's like, all right, well, thank you for sending me the pictures or the videos or whatever. Or, oh, wait a minute, you never got my message, but, whatever. And then, of course, that experience isn't that great. Or I say, hey, thank you for sending the message. Do you mind sending that video or that picture in, insert other messaging app, even though I know it's just easiest for you to send it through your default messaging app. And that really is the name of the game right there, default messaging app. So yeah, I am curious to see what happens, let's say in September, October of next year. That is my guess. But yeah, I just thought this was interesting. So I know most of my videos are pretty niche subjects, but yeah, this is, from my perspective, pretty fascinating.